This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hello, I'm Lee Bortons, and it's Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. Welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Kirsty Gilpin and I discuss lessons each week from our math curriculum for families with students enrolled in classical conversations communities. This academic year, our club has been working on a lesson a week together as we prepare to answer our children's questions. And as we near the last couple of weeks of our academic year, I really look forward to hearing some testimonies and insights from our club. So, Kirsty, what do you have today?
Well, Lee, I wanted to start today by just saying that if we have people, especially people who are watching the recording and not necessarily with us live, I just wanted to actually personally invite them to come live. We had somebody mention in a Help Scout ticket that, man, all those moms on the book club are so smart and they're all like math people. And I just thought what a praise it was. And I wanted to say this publicly because I remember a couple of years ago when all of you moms that are on our book club were like, I'm not a math person, I'm struggling. And you've grown so much by investing an hour of your life with us every week. And we've grown together so that now people are going, oh, they're all really math people and they're all really smart. And so if you're on the book club, I want to just praise God with you for how much you have all grown, and seeing the fruit of your labors over these last couple of years. And if you are watching this recording and you think that these are special people that showed up for this conversation, they're special because they showed up. They did not show up because they're special. This live time is for everybody. And so if you find yourself available at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, please come join us. Please bring your questions. Please be willing to raise your hand and say, hey, I didn't get that, or that didn't make sense to me, because that's why we're here. And you can come and grow alongside of us, because none of us are here because we're special, but we're special because we're here. And you can come and be special because you're here too. I just wanted to really praise God for all the growth that we have, and just make sure everybody knew that they were welcome to come and be here. So that said, I'm going to jump us into our time today. And we always start with where we are on the math map. And this week, you're going to have to look down to the bottom of our math map to see that we are in lesson 29, seeing the unseen, and just reiterating that idea of imagination is when we start to be able to conceptualize things or see things that we're not necessarily experiencing with our senses, right? And so we're now using our mind to recognize patterns or to see something a little bit farther. And that's exactly what seeing the unseen is. And so when we talk about seeing the unseen, we use it because it's scriptural, right? To talk about things that God has done, but also, right, so we can be seeing the things that God has done through math. But it's also a mathematical idea, right? So we're continuing patterns. So I might have a pattern written in front of me, and I'm continuing that pattern. That's what all of our lesson pages do. They have examples, and then we're continuing patterns. And so when we do that, we're seeing the unseen, right? We're discovering what goes in those blanks that wasn't there. And so this idea of seeing the unseen really is from the very basic, right? Being able to follow a pattern of 1, 2, 3, what comes next, to the very grand ideas of how is God revealing himself through mathematics. And we celebrate this in our blank books each year. And so we know that in your first year through the math map, you might get to week 29 and still have a blank book and spend a week filling that blank book up. Or if you've been doing this for a year or two, you might have started your blank book back on week 1 and started capturing some ideas. And most people are going to be somewhere in that range of things. But remember, it's just an opportunity to keep a record of where you've seen the unseen, how to break through as you went through this year. So, of course, we are almost done working through the complex booklets, but this week especially is applicable to all of our domains. So whichever you are using at home, we are ready to celebrate with you how you have seen the unseen. So this week for our quick flip arithmetic, I wanted to sort of give us a picture of like how far you could take this. And we haven't gotten here, right? Nobody in the math map this year in our complex lessons is doing this. But if you have students who are in advanced math or doing right, some other advanced math curriculum, these are some things that you may be seeing. And here's how you can use the quick flip arithmetic distributive property game, right, to really dive deep. And so I thought I would just talk through this briefly. So notice I said we're going to flip over 3 cards and look at a form such as ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's our general form of a quadratic equation. And here's a great place to practice with our students that the x is the variable because it stands for lots of values, right? All of the possible values of x. In this case, all the real numbers, right? X represents all of them. A, B, and C are parameters because they represent just one value at a time, right? And so it sounds like they can be anything, right? They could be any real number, but they're only one value at a time. And so that's the difference between a variable and a parameter is that X sort of holds all of those values at once, whereas A, B, and C can be any value, but just one at a time. So when we flip our cards, right, we're replacing our parameters A, B, and C with the values of those cards. So when I flip my cards over, that's what I would write. And I would read that as 13x squared minus 3x plus 8 equals 0. Now, I'm not going to work through all of these with you today, but I just wanted to show you some of the things that you could then do, right? When we look at this, we could explore it, right? So with our less experienced students where this is still really unfamiliar, exploring might just take the form of saying, right, does it have roots? What does roots mean, right? What would factoring look like, right? I'm exploring, not necessarily solving. Analyzing might be, I'm actually going to answer some of those questions and not just say, hey, it has roots or it doesn't have roots, right? And I'm going to actually start to maybe answer some of those questions. And then solving might be answering all of those questions. So there's different levels we could go through. One of the things that we could do is when we're talking about a quadratic equation, when we talk about how many complex roots, this is from lesson 8, where we talk about this, and we also see it in other places, but let me just turn on my pen here. Right, so our index here is going to tell me that I would have 2 complex roots, right? So even with our youngest students, we could maybe connect that idea that my highest exponent there is telling me I have 2 complex roots. Now, the next question, how many real roots? I may not know that without doing some more work, right? If we go back and we look at lesson 6, we find the quadratic formula and the determinant, and that's going to determine how many real roots that I would have. So there's an opportunity to go back and practice that. I could talk about factoring by inspection. When I factor by inspection, that's really using my distributive property in reverse to see what would these factors be, right? So if I had this, this may not factor. I just want to be clear. I flipped the cards, right? This was so I may not be able to factor by inspection. If I could, it means that I would be able to write it in some form here. And I don't think that there is any way that I can make this work, right? to factor by inspection. So the next thing that I might do is factor by completing the square. That again is worked through in lesson 6, and the students also see it a little bit in lesson 28, depending on the domain that they're in. The quadratic formula, again, we talked about that in lesson 6. That's that negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So for students who have memorized that, I can plug and chug to come up with what the roots would be, and then use those roots to write the factors. And then finally, if I've found those roots and I've analyzed my expression here or my equation here, I might be able to write the graph. So I didn't go through all of that because I didn't want this to be an algebra lesson necessarily, but more of an opportunity to point you in the direction of still using these games to practice these more advanced ideas, right? These more complicated ideas. Because sometimes it's easy for us to think, oh, quick flip arithmetic, it's just for arithmetic, right? But algebra is just a generalization of that. And so I can still use these games, right, to practice these algebraic skills, no matter how old my students are, what level they're working at. Are there any questions?
Kirsty, I just have a suggestion that when you're starting this, you might want to only throw 2 cards down and leave your first card always be 1, just so it's not so complicated at first.
That's a great.
So, yeah, that's a great suggestion. Kirsty, I was just wondering, like, so you have minus 3x. Is that because, like, did you just arbitrarily say, okay, red is going to be minus? Or, okay.
Yeah, that's just been my, one of the things you could do, right? So you don't have to,
Okay.
but that's one of the things you could do to keep your positives and negatives is choose
Right.
that.
And
Or you might want to make it so that one of you could say like, hey, spades are positive reals and clubs are positive imaginary, and then you could have negative reals and negative imaginary. So you could do a lot of different things with your cards depending on, right, how much variability you want to add in there.
Okay, thank you.
I like the red and black for, like, I've always had trouble remembering, do I want my books to be in the black or in the, like, which? This would help me get that straight. Negative, red is debt. Black is profit or not assets. I'm using the wrong words, but you guys know what I mean.
Kirsty, can you speak to, this is not really related to this, but since you looked at the scope and sequence page, can you speak to why the I pages are not in 29 and 30? Was there a
Sure.
particular
So really by the point we get to 29 and 30, we wanted students to and tutors to really be able to sort of broaden their view a little bit and say, okay, these last 2 weeks are capstone weeks for my year. And so now I want to maybe go back and look at all of these different resources that I have, and then how can I integrate that and put that together, and really not be distracted by having lots of extras that and focusing on that. So that was a big part of it. You know, the I was thinking today about integration because there's all these memes, right, that pop up about how like there's simple integration and then like really ugly integration. And I was thinking again about the fact that integration is this art, right? And whether it's calculus integration or integration of our strands, right? When we want to integrate the ideas in our strands, that integration is an art that requires a depth of grammar, right? To be able to integrate. I'm going to be able to integrate mathematically much more quickly if I know what those key functions are and and their integrals are. I'll be able to recognize patterns and integrate. But I've been thinking about the fact that that's also true if I'm trying to integrate Latin and science and exposition and debate, that if I don't know anything about whatever the science is, right, whatever my research is, if I didn't do that, I can't integrate that with my literature, right? That I have to have that knowledge there in order to be able to pull things together and integrate. And so I really wanted to encourage us that that's one of the reasons why it's so important in community that our students are all working through similar materials, why it's so important in community that our students are doing the work at home. Because when we have that conversation where we're trying to integrate our learning, if we don't have that base of knowledge to draw upon, we're not going to be able to pull it together. And so weeks 29 and 30 are opportunities for our tutors to draw together, to pull together, and help our students to integrate some of those ideas. And that's one of the reasons why they were left out of those pages were left out, to really give our tutors the space to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we are going to take a couple of minutes, and we can still talk about our art for the day, right? So we still want to start our day with an exordium and giving our students the opportunity to talk about our cover. And so what do you see on our cover today, and why might that have been chosen as our art for this week?
Well, I absolutely think of the spiritual realm. Sorry, just it's so powerful. Just thinking of the spiritual realm and seeing the unseen in our relationship with God, that we don't always think of all of that activity going on around us all of the time. And this is like a little glimpse of that, I think, when I look at this picture, and definitely think of that, having a glimpse of seeing that unseen that's taking place. This is such an important part of our life that we don't always think about.
I love how it's a capstone for Melancholia, the first picture, or Melancholia, how do you pronounce it, for the first picture, where the angels are puzzled, and now the angels are celebrating. And I hope that's how we begin each school year, puzzled and curious, and then learning we actually can make some progress.
Could somebody enlighten me? Like, what is happening on Earth in this picture? I feel I should know. There's Roman soldiers trying to wreak havoc, but that's what it looks like to me. But
I think it actually has something to do with Mary. And so it's actually, I think, has something to do with Mary herself. So that would be something to research separately, but it does give us this picture of there being things happening on Earth, and we're all surrounded by those things that are happening in the heavenlies.
right. And I was just thinking, it looks like whatever's happening on Earth looks like it might not be going super well. I don't know, but I just, I think of that time when I think it was Elisha that they were surrounded by the enemy, and the young man was like, that was with him was distraught, and he said, open his eyes, Lord, that he could see what's on our side, and then he could see all these like legions of angels surrounding them, and so it kind of like, I don't know, it just makes me think of that, like my perspective is so limited for like, oh no, things aren't going well, when really there's just so much on our side. And
Does anybody think it's comical that there's a dog in the picture at the bottom? Like when I think of a picture of Rome, I don't think of a dog being in the picture. So I think that's very interesting.
He has a collar on too.
Yeah.
Mm. So it's somewhat related to that. Our dog was probably still is very sick, but we really thought she was going to die right before my son left for boot camp. And I mean, there were actually 3 days in a row or very close together where I was ready to take her to the vet and be like, I think this is it. And the Lord stayed my hand. Um, and she has really had sort of a miraculous recovery. And I was praying about it, sort of marveling to the Lord that she was doing so well. And he said, well, you asked if she could stay around till Luke got home from boot camp. Why are you surprised? And so just to see the dog and Jana telling me, right, look at everything that's above you here. Well, why are we surprised when God answers our prayers? And that was my experience. And I just wanted to encourage all of us that when we ask him for things, to expect him to answer because he likes to give us good things. And he is fighting those battles in the heavenlies for us. And he does will, right, to give us the things that we ask for when they're good for us. So I just wanted to encourage all of us to be expecting his answers instead of surprised when he answers.
And I think along those same lines is I just feel like we should be more quick to remind each other of this, especially like that is the purpose of community. And yet I know sometimes like I don't really know where that person's at, or I know I don't know the whole story, but I do know that there's a lot going on unseen. And I I know enough about God to say who he is and his goodness and remind other believers to have hope in that.
Nina, that reminds me that when people ask for sign in order to believe, the response is, look at you. Why are you asking for signs? But once we do believe, he gives us all kinds of testimonies to share with one another to build up our faith. And so we need to not hold those tightly, but share them.
I love the calmness of Christ in the center of that.
Is there another piece of art where this might remind you, or this might remind you of there being a holy figure that is in the center of the heavenlies?
I think there's a lot. So where are you going? Give us another clue.
Think back to our 1D lessons and one of our covers there. This makes me think of that cover.
I don't know if this is correct, but I'm thinking of, didn't we have like a piece of was it the Sistine Chapel with the cherubs in there? I don't know if that's the one you're referring to.
Is it division?
Yes, it is. I'm just going to pull my booklet out and hold it up, right? It's a similar picture, and we don't see quite all of it, but we still see, to me, there's a similarity between these two. That swirling, right, and God in the center. And especially I think if we were to look at the full picture, we might see even more.
When you first said about, a holy image in the middle, it also, before you said in 1D or heavenlies, I think that the intersections week and the rates of change week also focus around, now rates of change has a lot of activity, and the intersections week doesn't have as much activity happening that we can see, but I'm sure that if we could draw what was happening spiritually, it would look a lot like this.
I just wanted to point out too that our Bible verse, 2 Corinthians 4:18, is our key verse for the math map and for the logic strand. So you'll notice as we're rolling out more products that every strand has a key Bible verse. And so this is ours. So I'll read this for us before we move on. While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. We see a lot of encouragement in scripture to be aware of what is unseen and eternal. All right. I am not going to spend a lot of time on the charts this week, but I did want to point out that there are charts. Even though there are not eye pages, there are charts. The charts are designed to just give you some ideas for how you might fill the booklet. While we say we're seeing the unseen and we're using our imagination to look beyond our senses, we then go through the 5 senses and think about how could you see math? So the unseen math that is involved in our 5 senses. Light is a big part of our sight. So we talk about light and sound with our hearing. Taste, smell, and touch are a little bit harder, but we give you some different ways that you might think about those mathematically also. The goal of these pages is not for you to understand all of these ideas, but just to help students who are looking for some things that might help them fill their booklets, that here is how to take your 5 senses and maybe discover how math is involved with those. The front page gives us some different ideas for what we might include in our booklet. And then down at the bottom, for example, there's some questions there. Right? How does taste reveal more about creation? What combinations of food go well together? Combinations could be addition. So there's some different ways that you could look at things that are happening around you in your life and be pulled into your Seeing the Unseen booklet. We would also encourage you to go back and look at the week 1 booklet, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But especially on the front cover, or sorry, the first chart, we talk about truth, beauty, and goodness. Those are the big ideas that we're moving towards. So you can also talk about truth, beauty, and goodness with your students and think, how have I seen truth, beauty, and goodness this year? And what do I want to capture into my book? So lesson 1 and lesson 29 really are companion booklets. And so if you haven't looked at lesson 1 in a while, I would encourage you to pull that out, and it's going to be helpful working through lesson 29. Are there any questions about the charts before we move on? I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking through these ideas. All right. So the next thing is we always want to pause and just see if anybody has any questions they'd like to share from week 28 proofs.
I had a question as we went through this lesson last week. It occurred to me, normally in the course of challenge, we finish a week's work and then we discuss and we celebrate on the learning that took place. I know with MathMap, we've kind of flipped that process. Do you foresee a point where it will be like the other strands, where we allow the children to work through the booklet and then bring to seminar like maybe more examples that they came up with or more proofs that they came up with, or just kind of celebrate those transcendental things?
I don't think so at this point. I think that the format will remain that it's more of a preview, but we do every week have built into that outline a time for students to share, whether that's asking a question from the previous week or sharing a testimony, something that they saw or had a breakthrough. So we certainly want to still capture that idea of celebration of the previous week. And that's why we pause every week here. Sometimes it's a short pause, but we try to pause just to model for tutors taking that time in community to give students the opportunity to celebrate something that they had a breakthrough on or ask a question. And then certainly in our lessons 15, 29, and 30, we want to also give students that opportunity for celebration.
And also, if you just have your students bring in that week's booklet, you're going to make it so that it's always that way. As the tutor and the students get better at understanding what's going on, I right from the beginning would have my students always bring in last week's booklet and this week's booklet, because otherwise they're kids. They won't remember what their questions from last week are. So to me, once you're in 3 or 4 weeks of it, you're going to start doing that both directions, if you are really paying attention to your students' needs.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mhm.
All right, so this moves us into our time to share. So we did have a couple of people that sent us in some things to share. So we're going to start with them, and then we've got some others if you guys don't want to jump in. But after we have these couple that were sent in, we're going to open it up to you to hold things up to your camera and share those things with us so that we can rejoice with you in how you've seen math this year. So Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you first.
Okay. So this is really fun. We have a tradition in our community. We have a camping trip in the fall that whoever wants to join us participates in. So this picture was actually from that camping trip. So it was special in that way too. But there was so much I saw in this, and even the further that we've come with the math map, because even rates of change, like I hadn't seen this at first, but just seeing the layers of the rocks in here, you can see the rates of change. There's obviously multiple angles you can see with the ladders and the parallel lines, even seeing the people lined up, thinking like a number line, the leaves that have fallen, showing like the change of time in the season. There's so much, and I'm sure you guys are seeing more. So I'd love to hear your other thing, what else you might see as well, if you want us to do that, Dr. Kirsty. And then I have one more thing to share after, if anyone else wants to give input.
So I loved it when this picture showed up because I have a similar experience with a similar photo. So I didn't submit it. I just thought, well, I'll talk about yours. And this was the math that I had to endure while climbing all those steps. How much weight can you lift? And as a 60-year-old woman who's a little bit heavy, there was a lot different energy and F equals MA going on than for these little kids.
That's a good one.
I always count steps when I go up. And I see these have been used a lot. They're not quadrilaterals anymore.
Good point.
I like that step, that idea that we can't see the instantaneous change, can we? Like we know that every footprint, every time there's a foot on those steps, a little bit more is worn away. But it would be almost immeasurable to see that. But yet over time, we can see the change. And so when we think about derivatives and that idea of instantaneous change, and we can't see it, right? But when you see the whole graph, you can see that there's change happening, but we can't see that one moment. And that was the thought that just came to me there.
Love that. I wanted to share real quick as well for anyone else who might be a director or tutor on this call that I can't remember if I shared this, but I had the idea because I might have shared this, that some students in my class are just dragging their feet about capturing their seeing the unseen. So when we took a break this past week, we walked around our church building. Unfortunately, it was too cold to go outside, and everybody had to point out something to each other. And at first they started out with, there's a square there, and I see a triangle and a circle, and just very simple, which are still math. But then I said, you guys, we've been looking at artwork together all year. I know you can see more than this. And so there was a piece of art on the wall that was abstract. And so we looked at that, and then they were able to see so much more after that. So just to encourage you, if you need ideas with encouraging your students as well, I think it was inspiring to them to be excited more about this and not feel overwhelmed. And I wish I would have done it earlier in the year, but at least we did it now. So just wanted to share that with you all.
Leslie, that's an excellent example of how people are not analogous. So you showed them the piece of artwork after prepping them some by walking around, and they could apply it to the artwork because that's what they've practiced. The parents and our leaders and the students themselves need to practice looking while they're just walking. Otherwise, it won't translate. And so hopefully one of the reasons we go over this exordium every week is so that if you have a half dozen to a dozen students with you, one or two of them each year will go, oh, I just saw, and they'll get it, but it won't be all of them the first year.
Thanks, Leslie. That was great. All right, Rachel, I am going to apologize that I did not put Luke's name on this because I was doing it a little bit last minute, but this is Luke sent this in. And so you can see in the middle is a page out of his Seeing the Unseen booklet. And then I enlarged some of the pictures or some of the images there. So if Luke's with you, would he like to talk about this, or would you like to talk about it, Rachel? Or is Rachel on?
I'm here and he's here. So do you want to talk about what you have here?
So you see Victor's car with him screaming LOL. You can see it's the shape. His car is the shape of a literal vector. You see? No harms were no piranha guns were harmed in the drawing of this picture. What?
Yeah, that's hilarious. I love how you did the absolute value of the scalar. You're really paying attention.
Yeah, I see vector. Cool.
I love the name where it says, my name is Luke and I'm a mathematician. We had to do that at practicum. And so I love that.
He's not wearing pajamas either, is he?
Pajamas. Oh yeah, he didn't. He said they weren't, and I don't think they are.
Yeah.
So,
I
So
like
did
his
you?
biceps though.
because he like
I know.
muscles.
So can you tell what are those when you spelled your name? What else do you have on here? What was
So like I used the vector U for the and absolute value Kelvin for K.
for? Some of these are like a little farther back from when we haven't reviewed these as much recently in the notations deck.
Is the E epsilon?
Is it epsilon or is it something else? I think it was
Maybe
Euler's.
Euler's number. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then your K was Kelvin. I thought it was the scalar K, but either way, that's wonderful. And it looks like your L is the symbol for line.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks. And did you see the binary place thing?
Did you understand it?
Did you
I like the tooth. That's so cute. The tooth.
Two to the tooth power.
So Luke, I think that you should like start a business and make t-shirts where you spell people's names with mathematical symbols, and then I'm a mathematician underneath it.
I would buy one for sure.
Yeah, start an Etsy site.
Although, I don't know any math symbols for everything,
Oh, we keep going through our deck.
but I know what I done for A. Greek letter alpha.
There you go. See? So, and you can get your mom to maybe look in the glossary and the companion, and she might be able to find some more symbols in there for you too.
We could get some CC students real excited about the math map with t-shirts like that. I love it, Luke.
That's great. Thanks, Luke, for wanting to share this with us because this was really terrific. All right. Jenna says that she's got some things from week 17, page 1. So I don't know if you can. Babs is sometimes really fast at grabbing images that we could share.
I could try to show it, but it's a little hard to see. It's the intersected shapes booklet. So can you guys see the two, I don't know if you can see these two shapes.
Yep.
So I showed this to my husband when I first opened it. And I said, what do you think of this page? Because when I looked at it, I saw something that intimidated me a little bit, lots of formulas and things. And he said, oh, this is really important stuff. He's like, so this one, the one with the circle that has a triangle inside, he said, when they bore tunnels, they're round, but then when you put like a roadbed in, that would be like the base of the triangle. So you need to know the formula to know what the diameter of your circle would need to be so that you can have the roadbed that you need. And then he pointed at that one right there, this inscribed square, and he said, so our trees are round, but the planks that we make from them are not. So you need to know how to cut boards so that you can get the most out of it without a lot of waste. And then he just started rattling off all these, like, I couldn't believe it. He's talking about nesting algorithms for packaging things and like how they get their drawings in these, they're a tube in a triangular FedEx box. And like how on our dashboard in our cars, our dashboards are rectangles, but most of the gauges are circles. And anyway, so I've been thinking about this ever since week 17, and like how houses are usually quadrilaterals, or well, 3D quadrilaterals, which I guess we would call rectangular prisms, right? Because that's it, they're easier to make, but also because most of our furniture is that shape. So like tables and beds and couches and you know, desks, whatever, so they fit better. But then I started looking around my house to see what things weren't straight edged, and like my coffee mug, which fits very nicely in my hand, and then like candles and lamps and flower vases, all like beautiful things that aren't actually meant to just stick into a fitted space. So that led me to, I'm a very literal person, so I have a hard time thinking abstractly, but I just got to thinking. So it turns out that houses work best when they're square, but human beings aren't square, and we don't have corners that fit nicely into little boxes. We do have a form, and it's mostly symmetrical, but it's also very organic and very lovely, flowing, growing, changing shape. And we're not meant to be plugged into little square boxes. So I guess that just finally made me think of the unseen, like the mind, and maybe more importantly, the soul. And was just thinking about trying to like plug a child's mind into a square grade level shape and testing it to make sure you're checking all the boxes. But our minds aren't quadrilaterals, and they're not even polygons of any. So I was just thinking about how classical education as a whole And this math curriculum in particular really helps us to grow and stretch and expand and nurture minds and souls. And that's true and good and beautiful. And it makes me want to cry.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you.
I have a question for Rachel and Luke. Do you object to us putting this on our Math Map social media?
No, I don't object. I actually love the comment. It's very encouraging. Who wears smiling teeth?
That is fine. Thank you.
All right. Yachting has a picture in the chat box, and I'm going to see if I can make this show up on the screen bigger for everybody. So I'm going to share a different screen so you can see what she shared with us. Okay. So can everybody see a great picture of somebody in trees? Okay. Yating, it's you.
Okay, that's actually my husband. So he is a real life lumberjack. So that's a picture of him roping a tree branch to get away from power line. So he's dangling from a tree in the power line. And before Math Map, he just intuitively know the weight of the trunk, where to rope, where to swing. And then we had a discussion at a house and say, wow, these is trade jobs. So, traditionally we felt like if you were to go into the domains, especially the domains of transcendentals, the algebras, those are the people that's going to college, right? Those are the people that's going to higher ed, not necessarily into trade jobs. But we know that more and more so, the trade jobs are really the people that shapes this country. And so we really like that. And Shauna has a son that's going into lineman school, and it just makes me think, and we were just talking about it. And one day my husband goes, wow, I'm seeing math, and I'm doing as I'm dangling from the trees. And if we don't understand math, we die. Literally, that's what he says, like we're gonna die if we don't understand math. And so I just thought that it's so interesting that no longer there's no separation or the dichotomy between going into trade jobs or going to college. If you go into college, you need higher math. But the seeing and unseen exercises actually helped us understand that it's everywhere. And then he also play with chemicals. So he does the tree jobs, but he also trying to grind the stumps, but also treat the invasive species. And so he plays with chemicals. And one day he was reading a big label, and he started asking himself questions. Okay, what do I know? And what don't I know? How do I figure it out? And then I was doing a math at home workshop with another guy that's a CC dad, and he's in a trade job too. He was in turf business. So he has to do with a lot of chemicals and labels too. And he was like, well, this is what I want my kids to do, is to be able to decode and read the label, not necessarily solving algebraic equation, because my son, I don't think I want my kids to go to college. I think their aspiration is in trade jobs. So it's really encouraging to see that these trade dads, the CC dads, are buying into seeing the unseen for math. But I thought it was funny that he said that if we don't know math, we die. He really mean literal death. So that was really fun.
Well, I think that arborists and lumberjacks are like the most dangerous job you can have. And so you're right that it's not, we think they're just climbing up trees and chopping off branches, but it's dangerous. And if you don't know what you're doing, and so much of that is math and physics, then yes, there's true danger there. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the fact that you said that what we're doing with our children is not college or trade job, or right, but we are giving them the skills to learn and the grammar, a common grammar, so that they can participate in this global conversation wherever God puts them. And right, that whether that's being an arborist or a lumberjack, whether that's taking care of lawns, whether that's being a, like the ultimate academic, right? Being a professor somewhere and writing papers, right? Wherever you fall on that scale that God puts you, we want to be united in community. And just like I said earlier, right, having that common body of work that our students are doing each week is how we participate in community. And so how important that is. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to share?
I have some things, but I have shared in the past. And so if there's other people, I'd love to wait, and only if you need some extra stuff.
I have a quick share if you can hear me.
Yeah.
This is Nicole. I have fun things that I found in my week 29. One of the most recent ones was we were watching The Wiz. I don't know if you guys have seen the old school take on The Wizard of Oz with Michael Jackson and Diana Ross and all of that. But we were watching The Wiz, and at the very beginning, there's a woman called Miss One, O-N-E, and she comes out singing, and she's saying all these mathematical terms, and it is so fun having, like, I grew up on this movie, and I never caught it before. And my kids, well, my daughter, she caught it, and it was just super fun. So we actually drew Miss One in our week 29. So that was really fun. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that I think I'm convinced that the Math Map is more of a character building curriculum than even math, because I've become much more comfortable in that moment of I have no idea what's going on, right? I have no idea what's on this page. I don't know. I just don't know. And I feel like in modern math classes, I never had to get there. I walked into the room and they told me what I was going to learn, and then they told me what I was learning, and then they let me practice what I was, then they showed me, and then they let me practice it. And I never had to say, oh, I don't know that. I always knew. So this curriculum, I had our first the Math Map at Home workshop this past week, and that was one of the major conversation pieces, was how frustration was actually a part of the curriculum, and that we're actually teaching our children how to be frustrated well, and how to ask that question, how do I find out? Like, I don't, like, to get to the place where you have to confess, I don't know. And then how do I find out? So I do have some students who abandoned it because they literally could not handle the I don't know part. And I mean physically couldn't handle it. They got so angry they couldn't handle it. And that's a heart issue in another situation. That's not a math issue, right? It's a character issue. And the longer I've done this and the more complicated the math got, and the more times I still didn't know after doing this thing for so long, the more I was like, man, this is character building. And it's a trust thing too. So that's my share for week 29.
Nicole, that was beautiful. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Nicole, because it doesn't matter which math book you have at all. There will be people who will be frustrated and give up. What I'm hoping will happen in classroom conversations is more and more people won't give up because they'll recognize their community is available to help them, that they're not on their own. And a lot of people want a video, or they want a better description or explanation in the companion, but really you guys and the community and the other students are their best help. And we have to keep pointing people to one another rather than a box. Right? We're so idolatrous when it comes to academics. And so thanks, Nicole, for explaining that the frustrations are part of the humanness of doing something that's hard and worthwhile.
Can I share one more thing to encourage tutors with an idea, or directors? So again, just trying to inspire students that are dragging their feet and putting it off. And we all have different ideas about incentivizing, but something we do in our classes, they earn beads just for bringing their resources. And so this week, so their beads, they earn a class party, like an ice cream party or whatever. So anyway, so I said, okay, if you come in and you have just one thing that you've glued into or drawn into your Seeing the Unseen book, just one thing, you get 10 extra beads. And if everybody does it, then you all get an additional 5 extra beads. So just something more just to nudge them, and it was effective. So just want to share, sometimes, we all know what's coming, but just again, doing those steps, stepping forward. And you probably all have great ideas in that too, but I just wanted to share what worked well in our classroom this past week.
I agree with that, Leslie, especially if you have like parents who are not engaged, because it makes the kids, go to their parents and say, I need to earn these beads, or I need to earn these rubber bands, or whatever the incentive is. And so, a lot of things the kids can do on their own. Like they can draw something in their book on their own, right? They don't need their parent to do that. But I think when the parent sees, oh, they're doing stuff and I'm not making them do it, right? I think that's another thing to kind of take note of too. But I think it does bring the parents in, to show them, hey, I'm still working on this curriculum. I'm still getting involved and I'm learning all these things.
So I'm just going to, if there's more people who want to share, I certainly want to encourage you to do that. I was just going to point out, I'm not going to talk about these, but I just wanted to show you some of the images that are in the lesson 1 booklet. So again, remembering that lesson 1 and lesson 29 make a good companion to one another. The bottom section of each page in the lesson 1 booklet has examples. There's student work that we collected that might be an inspiration to students of things that they could put into their own lesson 29 booklet. So here we might say, okay, and you might have this conversation with your student looking at that week 1 booklet. Why would a student pick this? What looks mathematical about this? Well, have you done something like that? Right. So we have artworks that students created. We have math problems that they did and wanted to include. We have photographs of activities they did. My Luke would really prefer that this not be in here, but I love the fact that he actually created the rules of Luke at a practicum back when we had 3-day practicums, and he was in one of the camps. This was something that he created there. And so it's old now, but I think it's really kind of fun. And from one Luke to another. So those are some things. Again, we just wanted to include some ideas right here. If you have a student who's musical, or a student who likes bugs and went out and looked in nature, these are just some different ideas that you could use to help your student come up with ideas for their own lesson 29 booklet. And they are in lesson 1. So if you flip back to lesson 1 and you're looking for some inspiration, it is included there. So we still want to tell our students, right, remind them about the resources. I was telling somebody today that when we think about what we're doing in the first year of the math map, and they say, well, what is it that we're trying to do, right? What should we be memorizing? Should we be mastering all of these different concepts? I said, really, the 3 things that you're going to come out of that first year with is 1, being able to navigate your curriculum, right? Just recognizing what mapping means and navigating your curriculum, understanding the way it's laid out. 2 is being able to use your resources, knowing where to look for your charts, knowing how to go and look at the solutions, knowing how to go and ask mom to look something up in the companion, recognizing the connection between the flashcards and the lesson pages, playing games, right? Knowing where your resources are. And then the third thing that we're hoping they're going to see is that all of these learning skills that we keep talking about, whether that's naming, attending, memorizing, expressing, and storytelling, or defining, comparing, talking about circumstance and relationship and authority, or even if it's talking about memoria and arrangement and elocution, delivery, and the one that I'm missing.
Invention.
Thank you, invention. That when we talk about all of those things, that they apply to our study of mathematics. And so they may not be experts at applying all of those to the study of math, but those are, if you think about those three things, if your student comes out of this year, right, they're well prepared to go deeper next year into the math concepts, and the year after that, and the year after that. And so we'll get to the mastery of the math concepts eventually, and we'll talk more about what that means next week. But that's why this resource reminders is so important, because we really want our students to be confident that they know how to use the resources and those learning skills in order to be masters of their own learning. And then just a reminder, we have next week is our reflection week. I really want to encourage you to bring a testimony to share that we could bless Lee for her birthday by bringing a testimony of how you've grown this year or how your students have grown this year. Again, if there's something that you would like to send in for us, if you're not able to join us live, or even if you are and don't want to be live, you're welcome to send us a short recorded clip or some written words if you would like us to have those ready to go next week. But we'll also have an open time for people to share like we did this week. So I just really want to encourage you to bring that. And then we'll be jumping into going through some of the games and activities that are on the back cover and what that might look like at home. And so that takes us to our final slide. And so I certainly, if anybody still wanted to share something and has not had an opportunity, or if you have a question that hasn't been answered, and that can be about any of the math map or the weeks, now is your time to do that. And I do want to thank everybody who shared today. It's such a blessing to see all of you growing and learning, because I have told people multiple occasions that I really believe this is the kingdom work that God has given me, that right, he is allowing me to build up his kingdom through this, and what a privilege that is. And so to see evidence of that is an incredible blessing. And so thank you all for participating and sharing.
Oh, looks like we can be done till next week. You're saving your best for then, right?
Well, have a great week, everybody. Bring your testimonies next week or send them in, and have a great math week.
Bye.